So after we with consider this step one, and if I have no power, if I have answered those questions that I do not have the power over the physical or the mental obsession of this addiction, what do I do? Because it's hopeless. You know, when I came to the understanding of that on my own, I couldn't deal with this. Just going to AA meetings was not enough. Just going to church was not enough. I needed to plug into something that I could get this power, that I could get some of this power. And again, as Bill indicated, that there was no more power within Ebby than there was at Bill at this moment. Yet here are two people, absolutely no power. Ebby has been sober. Bill is drunk. So there's that difference there. What happened to Ebby? Ebby was able to plug in to that power source. I believe that in step one, if we truly admit and believe that I have no power, that if offered hope, I would have the desperation of a drowning man to get that last breath of air. And so when you think about that, if someone has taken your head and put it underwater and they got their hand on your head and you're drowning, I mean, you absolutely, what would you be willing to do to get that one last breath of air? So I believe that we need to have that desperation of a drowning man in order to recover. I have to, when we talk about going to any length to stay sober, what am I willing to do to stay sober? The book has told us that these men, these first 100, which is the basic text of the big book, the first 164 pages, primarily that first 103 pages with the steps, these men were willing to go to any length to stay sober. So when that question came, that we became willing to believe that there was a power greater than ourselves, I need to ask myself that question. Am I willing to believe that there's something greater than me that could save us, that could save me? If I'm not willing to believe that, I need to go back to step one and try it on my own power again. Consequences will get us to that point of becoming willing to believe. If I go into this with the desperation of a drowning man, I become, if someone is, if I'm drowning, I want to tell you, anything that will get me out of that situation, I'm ready to accept and willing to. For me, early in my treatment, I was not willing to accept, because I said, if this has got anything to do with AA and God, I want nothing to do with it. I'll go out and die. Through this process, when I started taking a look at where I was at, I became willing to believe that there was a something. I wasn't at the point of God yet, but the first, as we open up the big book, one of the things I love about the big book is the very first, when I open it up, that first page, Alcoholics Anonymous, says the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. It gives me some hope that people can recover. And so what do I need to do to recover? Well, the first thing, I need to become willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself. And what is that? Obviously, being an alcoholic, it should seem so simple. I mean, here I am, at the scourge of society, the town drunk, which is hard to accomplish in a town of 20,000 people, to be classified as the town drunk. It takes a lot of hard work. Why would I not be willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself? For the alcoholic or addict, it really is kind of a difficult thing to believe, because for whatever reason, we believe that if I have enough willpower, I should be able to stop this. My willpower is of no avail in my recovery. So we go to step 2 in the big book, and it's described in the chapter We Agnostics, and it starts on page 44. So, and again, this chapter is 26 pages, so 23 pages. 43 pages on step 1, just to determine that I have no power. 23 pages on step 2. There's a purpose for that. If I have no power, and if I'm convinced that I have no power, it's pretty obvious for me, if I want to recover from my addiction, that I need to figure out a way to tap into a power source. That's what the chapter We Agnostics is about. Of course, an agnostic is one who doesn't necessarily, he doesn't believe that there is a God, but also doesn't necessarily believe that there isn't a God. He's just kind of that fence warmer that says, just prove it. There is no proof that there is or isn't. So most alcoholics or addicts somehow or another fall into this class of We Agnostics. I've not seen the absolute evidence of the existence of God. I've never been able to physically touch God. So it's a faith thing. Alcoholics and addicts are people who struggle to rely on faith. But the chapter starts out, the first paragraph on page 44 says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So, when I came walking into treatment, and this counselor mentioned the word God, and then I read, only a spiritual experience will conquer it. I immediately put that spiritual experience in God into this classification of religion. We're not going to be talking about religion here. We're going to be talking about an experience, a spiritual experience. Appendix 2 in the back of the big book, another one of those things that for the alcoholic or addict, well, it's an appendix, it's not that important, so I don't bother to read it. But Appendix 2 very specifically describes a spiritual experience. And it's at the bottom of that page, page 569, it talks about he finally realizes that he has undergone profound alteration in his reaction to life. That's what the spiritual experience is here. above in that paragraph talks about most of our experience are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. So often people, we think of Bill W.'s spiritual experience, where he had this incredible experience with a light in the room. That here it was dark, and all of a sudden this bright light, and he felt the presence of God like he'd never experienced before. That's a rare experience to have that. The spiritual experience that they're describing here comes over a period of time. It doesn't happen like this. One of the things that does happen is that the obsession to drink is removed. Is that a profound alteration in our reaction to life? Yes. So we think, well, I haven't had that aha moment with God. So I must not have had this spiritual experience. Well, has the obsession to drink been removed? If it has, you've had a spiritual experience. You just didn't recognize it. And I say that because that was more along the lines of my experience. But again, I have to, go back here. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit, what does that mean? Ask yourself the question. Yes, I've honestly wanted to quit drinking, but I haven't been able to stop. Then it says that we need to undergo this spiritual experience, this profound alteration in our reaction to life. I cannot get that as profound alteration on my own. I need to have help. Bill W. talked about it when he's sitting with Ebby T. He did not have that power, that ability within him. That had to come from somewhere else. And for Ebby, and eventually for Bill, it came from God. The big book, page 45, at the top of the page there, it says that we could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might. So what is it? I could wish to be moral. My experience, I knew that what I was doing, I knew that walking out on a wonderful wife and 3 little kids was not moral. I knew the difference from right from wrong, and I absolutely knew that what I was doing was wrong. So, and I wished that I could be moral. But on my own, I couldn't. I continued to make those decisions which were not moral. We could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. With everything within me, I tried to not drink again. When my daughter asked me, please, Dad, don't drink when you come to see me. But the needed power wasn't there. I didn't have it within me. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. And it wasn't because that I didn't believe in God. I believed that there was a God. I had no doubt about that. That wasn't the question. But believing that there is a God is a lot different than having Him working within me to give me that power. You see, when I hear people say, step 2 is easy, yeah, because I believe in God. Well, guess what? So does the devil. And that ain't blind faith. The devil absolutely knows that there's a God. For crying out loud, he got kicked out of heaven by that God. But how well has that worked for him to believe that there was a God? Obviously, it hasn't. Why? Because the devil is convinced that he's better than God, or he's equal to, or that he should be God. You know? So that believing in, or believing there is a God, is a lot different than having that God at work in our life. We're going to find, as we go through these steps, and we're going to talk about this later, but I want to put it out front right away, that this analogy that I have, and again, because I'm not pretending to be the brightest bulb on the tree, so I got to keep things simple. But so I could be sitting at the circus, and I see this guy is pushing a wheelbarrow on this high wire, this tightrope, or whatever they call that act. And I could be sitting out in the audience believing that he's going to be able to do that without falling. But for me to trust in that would require that I climb up and sit in the wheelbarrow. There's a big difference. I can believe in, but do I trust in? I believe that this fellow, I believe that God exists. Am I willing to trust God by going up and sitting in that wheelbarrow? Huge difference, and we're going to talk about this in some of the later steps. Amazingly, one of the things that shocked me when I was introduced to these steps, page 45, says that lack of power, that was our dilemma. I thought that alcohol was. I thought alcohol and drugs were my problem. That was my dilemma. This is saying lack of power is our dilemma. Do I believe, going back to step one, that I lack power? I need to ask myself that question. We have to find a power. If I lack power, if I believe that that's my problem, we had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. So now this is italicized here in the big book. Power greater than ourselves. Anything, when I'm reading something and it's italicized or put into bold print or whatever, that tells me, whoa, stop, pay attention to this. So here it is, a power greater than ourselves is italicized. So I need to ask myself the question, what is a power greater than myself? If it's greater than me, can I destroy it? If it's greater than me, can I manipulate it? If it's greater than me, will I ever be able to fully comprehend it? So, if it's greater than me, obviously I can't destroy it. So when I hear the things about, well, and very honestly, I've been to thousands of AA meetings. I've never sat in a meeting where someone had a light bulb as a higher power. These are the stories I hear, but so let's just address that. Can I destroy a light bulb? Yes. Can I manipulate the light bulb? Don't turn the switch on. Is that light bulb, will I ever be able to comprehend that light bulb? Well, obviously someone invented it, so it's not a power greater than me. So when I hear these things that you can have a light bulb as your higher power, come on. God did give us brains. Think about it. Does that make sense that a light bulb or a doorknob is a power greater than me? No, absolutely not. I go back to a couple of years ago, sponsoring a fellow or working with him through these steps, and he makes the decision while he's got this rock in his backyard. And again, I'm not telling you what your higher power needs to be, but I am going to ask the questions, and they may be some hard questions, but he's got this rock in his backyard that he really likes. And so he makes the decision that he's going to have this rock as his higher power. So we just simply go through these questions. Can you destroy that rock? Well, yeah, stick of dynamite, take care of that rock in a hurry, because it's not going to be a rock, it's going to be gravel. Can I manipulate it? Yeah, get a tractor in there with a bucket and you can move it. You can move it anywhere. Can I comprehend it? Do I understand that rock? Oh yeah, all I got to do is cut it and take a look at the layers and I figure out everything about it. So, is it a power greater than yourself? Well, you know, I really do believe that I can use that rock as my higher power. So, all right, you know, well, let's go to see if this makes sense. So we're about to move to step 3 that says, we made a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of my rock as I understand it. Step 5 would read, admitted to myself, to another human being, and to my rock the exact nature of my wrongs. Step 6, became entirely ready to have my rock remove these defects. 7, humbly asked my rock to take away these shortcomings. The part that kills me is at step 11, and listen to this, does it make sense? Sought through prayer, through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with my rock as I understand him. Praying only for the knowledge of my rock's will and the power to carry that out. Does that make sense? Obviously not, and hopefully you're laughing as much as I did. That is absurd. So let's get serious about this higher power stuff. We need to put some thought into that and use our brains. Does it make sense? So the book says it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? The very next paragraph says that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. I always thought this book was about alcohol. Alcoholics Anonymous. How many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism? It was going to teach me how to not drink anymore. What did we just read here? The main object of this book is to enable us to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That just shocked me. And as we go through the rest of these steps, we're going to see how that plays out. Of course, and for me, well, you know, now I'm starting to get on the spot here with this God business, because I don't like God, and I don't want to hear anything about God. So the very next page 46, tells us that many of us, many alcoholics and addicts, have had that same experience, that same thought. This is going to be about God. I want nothing to do with them holy rollers. I've seen that on TV. I've been to that. It didn't make sense to me. I grew up religious. Blah, blah, blah. Page 46, the first full paragraph, simply says that we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. So I need to go back up here to that word prejudice. Is my belief about God prejudice? What is prejudice? Prejudice, bias, is a belief system. In fact, it's a false belief in our thinking about what prejudice is. And of course, we usually put this to race. It's a false belief about something. I needed to be willing to lay aside my belief about God and put the religion business on the back burner and just be open to what this book has to say about God and about that power greater than ourselves. The next page, page 47. And again, we're kind of skipping through this. I encourage you to read through the whole things because we're going to go through a process here in this step 2. Page 47 says, at the start, go up just one line up here. It says, do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. Again, it talks about my prejudice towards spiritual terms, towards God. It says again, at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which seemed entirely out of reach. Next paragraph, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's on the way. It's been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. What's the simple cornerstone? Willingness to believe. So lay aside all of my thoughts about God, about my prejudices towards God. Lay all of those aside, just become willing to believe, and upon that, this wonderful cornerstone can be built. Page 49 again. We who have traveled this dubious, at the bottom paragraph, page 49, we who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. See where they've taken us from? Prejudice against God. And now all of a sudden, in just a couple of pages here, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. This next line here, I mean, talk about throwing salt in an open wound, because it's a question I had to ask. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is about. Actually, we used to, speaking of the alcoholic, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. That was me. Here I was, criticizing people of faith, religion, saying that they were the weird ones, when in reality, actually, it was me who had no reasonable conception at all of what life is all about. That one kind of hurts. It says, we used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness, which we should have sought ourselves. most alcoholics, very familiar with this, some of the greatest religious debates occur in bars. Because we amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices. That gave us something to laugh about at the bar, or complain about, or make us feel better about ourselves. That that person's religious and he's I'm better than him. We did that all the time. That's why I said the greatest religious debates of all time happen in the bar. But what I didn't see is that these people were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness, which I should have been seeking myself. As an alcoholic, how stable do you suppose I was? How happy was I? And then this part, usefulness to others? Oh my word. I should have been seeking those things myself. Instead, I would rather criticize those who were. Page 50 then says, instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. What's that sentence saying? I looked at the human defects of a few religious people, used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation of religion. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. I was looking at a few people who had some issues or some problems and condemning the entire anything to do with God because a few people may have had some shortcomings. I was quick to point out their shortcomings, not so quick to look at mine. Page 53. Let's skip over to page 55 first. And again, I want you to notice to where we've come from in the beginning of this chapter to page 55, where we're at here. Where have they taken me? Page 55, the second full paragraph says, actually we were fooling ourselves, for deep down inside in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity. What's calamity? Or first of all, what's obscured? Obscured is clouded, made distant, or covered up. So it may be covered up by calamity. What's calamity? Trouble, problems. It may be obscured by pomp. What is pomp? I think of some of the religious things that, as a child growing up, that we had to do, and it was, oh boy, it was all this, pomp would be like the beautiful chandeliers, the stained glass windows, the red carpet, all of these things. That's pomp. So it may be obscured by that. It may be obscured by the worship of other things. Like what? What are other things? Money, sex, drugs, looks, whatever. Other things. I worshiped them. I worshiped, and I've seen people worship things rather than God. So it could be obscured by any of these things. But in some form or other, It is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. And in the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. So every person has a fundamental idea of God. I made alcohol and drugs my God. It became my higher power. It became the solution to my problems rather than God. I had to look at myself growing up as a teenager. I was kind of a latecomer to the alcohol scene because I didn't drink until after high school. In fact, it was my senior class trip. But I grew up an incredibly shy kid. And particularly if a woman would come up and speak to me, oh my word. I was just flabbergasted. I didn't know how to talk. I mean, I just was so incredibly shy. Now understand that being shy is just a nice word for fear. So I had a great fear of women. That fear was a fear of rejection. So my senior class trip, I was introduced to alcohol. And guess what happened? I took that first couple of drinks of alcohol and I became a changed man. That fear left. I was no longer afraid of those women. I became absolutely convinced that they not only wanted me, but they needed me, and that I was doing them a favor by talking to them. They call it liquid courage. Most alcoholics or addicts are pretty familiar with that. Alcohol became the solution to my fear problem. That night, I realized that alcohol did for me what God had never been able to do, or what I could not do for myself, to solve my fear problem. So I needed to, in recovery then, figure out how was God and could God solve my fear problem? Because as soon as I quit drinking, guess what came back? That fear of rejection. I hate that being shy. I hated it as a kid. I hate it today. But it's a fear problem. Alcohol did for me what God couldn't. But I began at that time, at the age of 17, I began to worship alcohol rather than God. Because alcohol was the solution, not God. Page 53, and I said we were going to come back to this. When we become alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? Notice how they've taken us from a willingness to believe to having to answer the question, he either is or isn't. What was our choice? Not always an easy choice. I go back to that desperation of a drowning man. If I'm drowning, do you believe that I would, if God were the only person there to help me, would I say, no thanks God, I don't believe in you. I refuse to believe in you. Therefore, I'll just drown? I don't think so. I've been in jail too many times and witnessed too many jailhouse conversions that, oh God, if you just get me out of this one, done it myself many times. If you just get me out of this one. All of a sudden, when life gets tough, I become willing to believe in God. Even if it's a last-ditch effort. If I have the desperation of a drowning man, I need to come to that conclusion that God either is or he isn't. What's my choice to be? Page 56 of the big book, and I'm laying in treatment. One night, and my sponsor is working through me with this. Again, I was in treatment for 5.5 months. By the time I left treatment, I had a sponsor. We had just begun to work these steps. And I'm laying in bed one night considering this step 2. And still not willing to believe or answer that question, God either is or he isn't. And I read this page, and it talks about a man who had grown up. He was a minister's son. And he attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought was an overdose of religious education. Now, I wasn't a minister's son, and I didn't attend church school, but I had become rebellious at what I thought was an overdose of religion. So he goes on to talk about what had happened to him. He became an alcoholic, business failure, all of these things. Now he's laying in a hospital bed. Go back to hospital. Today it would be considered a treatment center, exactly where I was laying. It says, one night when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge means anger, so our friend's anger rose as he bitterly cried out, if there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question. Is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? When I read this, I had been so, up to this point, I had been so critical of the religion that I grew up in, of all those religious people that I knew. And I had to ask myself the question, of all those people that I grew up with, I'm the only one who's in treatment right now. I don't know of anyone else from that town or from that church or that religion right now who's sitting in a treatment center having gone from going through a 28-day spin cycle to over 5 months of treatment. Is it possible that all those people are wrong and I'm right? Town where I came from, 400 people, all the same religion, all the same ethnic background. Is it possible that all those 400 people are wrong and I'm right? I'm the only one laying in treatment. I'm the only one who had walked out on a wife and kids and who had been to jail several times, who ended up being homeless, living in an old beat-up vehicle. I'm the only one who had that. Who am I to say there is no God? My experience, he talks here about, he immediately tumbled out of bed and to his knees, and all of this great things happened to him. That didn't happen to me, but that one paragraph at least made me willing to believe in God and willing to lay aside all prejudice and allow God the opportunity to have me, that simple belief in God. Now, the amazing thing that happened here, once I became willing to believe, and as I talked to my sponsor the next day, I became willing to believe, and he immediately took me to step 3. You know, I hear this sometimes that oh, this takes a long time to get through these steps, and it took me a long time. Oh Lord, I just hate it now. But well, it took me a long time to get here. It's going to take me a long time to get back. You do not read that anywhere in the pages of this big book. In 1940, they needed to get you through these steps as quickly as possible because people were dying on a daily basis from alcoholism. My sponsor recognized in me early, if you drink, I need to get you through these steps quickly. I need to get you to the point where this obsession is removed, because if I don't, you'll drink again, and for you to drink again is to die. He immediately took me to step 3. Step 3, simply, page 60 of the big book, talks about some of the requirements of this step. You know, the first requirement is that be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. All I have to do is ask myself the question, how well did I do at running my life? It's kind of a step 3 or a review of where I've been, of steps 1 and 2. So how well did it work to run my life my way? Not very well. Okay, then I need to get to talk about the root of my problem. Page 62 then says selfishness, self-centeredness. We learned before that the real problem was that I lacked power. So step 3 is going to now tell me why I lack power. Because I'm selfish and self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our trouble. The root of my problem of not having power is because I'm selfish and self-centered. And it's driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. That's what drives my selfishness and self-centeredness. That second full paragraph says, our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. The alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. There often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without His aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we couldn't live up to them even though we would have liked. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. We've already discussed this. Step 2 talked about I had moral convictions. I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I had a desire to not be immoral anymore, but on my own, I couldn't do it. So step 3 up to this point is just reviewing what we've been through in step 1 and 2. Now it says we had to have God's help. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. So I need to ask myself that question. What are some ways that I play God? I play God by being dishonest, being controlling, being angry, hanging on to resentments. They're wrong, I'm right, being judgmental and critical. Those are all different ways that I play God. This says I needed to stop that. Again, we talked about it in step 2. I needed to put aside all prejudice, all of my beliefs, and become willing to let God, became willing to believe in God. We're going back through this again. I need to stop playing God. It didn't work. The beauty of this is, this is called the third step promises. When I stop playing God, take a look at what happens. Next, step 3, next we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He's the principal, we're his agents. He's the father, we're his children. Most good ideas are simple. This concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we passed to freedom. The keystone, when we think of arch, because the big book does talk about construction terms a lot. So, cornerstone, that's the willingness to believe. So the cornerstone, any building that's built, and particularly if you're building with brick or stone, you need that cornerstone. That's what everything else on that building is based on. The keystone of an arch is that stone right in the middle at the top of the arch that holds everything together. You take away that keystone, the arch collapses. So this concept, what concept? Me not playing God, is the keystone of this new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. One simple little thing. Me not playing God. Look at all these incredible things that happen. I feel new power flow in. I began to see that I could face life successfully. I began to lose my fear. It starts to go away. Here we are. Haven't even done step 3 yet. One simple little thing. And my life is already beginning to change. One of the things that I see with step 3 that I experienced in going through treatment was we believe that we need to turn our will and life over to the care of God in step 3 before we move on to the other steps. I have to take a look at how step 3 is worded. It says we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. If I make a decision to do something, have I done it yet? No. I've just made the decision that I'm going to. If I make a decision to go to Walmart, am I at Walmart yet? No. There's a process that I need to go through before I get to Walmart. I'm not at Walmart until I've gotten in my car, started it up, shoveled the snow, done whatever needs to be done, planned my route, driven down that route, got into the parking lot, closed the door of my car, locked it, walked through the parking lot, and boom, now I'm at Walmart. There's a process. Made a decision to turn our will and life over to the care of God is a process. Step 3 simply says, we were now at step 3. I've stopped playing God. I've made a decision. I'm no longer have all these biases. And so now it's very simple. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, God, I offer myself to you to build with me and do with me as you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will, not my will, your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, your way of life. May I do your will always. Step 3. It does say, the next sentence, we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. The way that I read this, the way that I understood it, was to think well, because what am I about to do? I'm about to abandon myself utterly to God. I haven't done it yet, but this is what I'm going to do. I need to make sure that I'm ready. Going back, do I have the desperation of a drowning man to stay sober? Is it still there? I do a quick review. I have no power. I can't do this on my own. I've came to believe that God could and would in step 2. I came to believe that my ideas, my concept about God was wrong, because I based it on a few people. I came to believe that. Am I now ready to put my will is my way of doing things. Am I willing to stop doing things my way and begin to do them God's way? That's abandoning myself utterly to him. I need to ask myself that question. You need to ask yourselves that question. Are you ready to completely put your life in God's care? If you are, step 4 begins that process of doing that. You haven't done it yet. Step 4 begins the process of doing that. Step 12, that process is completed, where it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. That's where we're stepping into. Ask yourself those questions. Are you ready?